It's August 3rd, 1943, and a Wellington bomber is about to crash land on the allotments in Walton Park. I wanted to do an update to this video because since we made it a few years ago, there's been a proper memorial placed here to the memory of the incident and the men that lost their lives that night. Hi, it's Paul from Wicked Acorn. I'm on the football pitch in Walton Park here in Sale in Greater Manchester. I'm standing on the site where the tail section of a Wellington bomber ended up on the night of August 3rd, 1943. This was an allotment at the time, and it's an event that's all but forgotten. Had things gone just a little differently, it would have been an even more terrible disaster. The world was at war, and the Wellington bomber was the first to bring the war to Hitler. It was the backbone of Bomber Command for the first few years of the war. Eventually, it would be replaced by the true heavies, like the Lancaster and the Halifax. But then it took another significant role as a crew trainer. Many bomber crews, regardless of which type of aircraft they ended up in, first flew together as a unit in Wellingtons. The Wellington was affectionately nicknamed the Wimpy by those who flew them, named after a popular cartoon character, J. Wellington Wimpy, who had an insatiable appetite for hamburgers. The crew were based at Lichfield, near Birmingham, where they had just finished a training course. They were all Australians, with the exception of tail gunner Sergeant John Titch McCarthy from Ireland. The pilot was Flight Sergeant Freddy Matthews, co-pilot Flight Sergeant Eddie Newell, bomb aimer Sergeant Edward Thompson, also known as Claude or Snow on account of his blonde hair, wireless operator Keith Forbes, and middle gunner, pilot officer Clive Luther. They were originally due to go on a nickel raid over France. The early nighttime operations, known as nickel raids, were simply to drop propaganda leaflets over the German population. They gave the crews valuable experience in night flying. The nickel raid was called off at the last minute due to bad weather conditions over France. Instead, they were instructed to do a mock bombing raid with Blackpool Tower as the target. While flying over Manchester, their port engine cut out due to a failure of the oil retainer. Normally, the aircraft would have been able to continue back to base or possibly land at Ringway, 10 miles away. Then the starboard engine started to lose power. They lost radio contact with the base, and from the wireless operator's position, Keith Forbes watched the aircraft's altitude plummet to 1,000 feet. It had been at 13,000 feet, and the speed was down to 120 miles per hour. From that moment on, the aircraft was doomed. The crippled Wellington bomber, leaking fuel with its one remaining engine spluttering, roared low over the A-56 and headed towards the sleeping homes in the Walton Park suburb of Sale. It was a dark, dry, moonless night. With the wartime blackout in effect, the crew had no idea where they were. Flight Sergeant Freddy Matthews switched on his landing lights and fought desperately to control his twin-engine plane. He managed to lift the Wellington bomber over the rooftops of nearby houses. The plane headed towards the homes on Walton Road. The undercarriage snagged the top of a tree and a telegraph pole and wires before clipping the chimney stack of 5 and 7 Walton Road. Then she belly flopped onto the vegetable allotments just outside the back door of 31 Raglan Road. The front end of the Wellington burst into flames. Fortunately for all involved, the aircraft was not loaded with bombs, but the ammunition from its machine guns exploded like a fireworks display in all directions. 12 feet of the tail fin end of the fuselage skidded the length of the allotment field and ended up outside the back doors of 35 and 37 Walton Road. 2 of the airmen were thrown clear and the courageous people of Walton Park clamored into the wreckage to help the trapped and wounded crew. Being the bomb aimer, Claude would have been in the most vulnerable position for a crash landing, particularly on this occasion, as he was probably in bomb-laying position on the floor of the aircraft, helping to guide the pilot through the blacked-out conditions to a clear landing site. Sadly, Claude died in the ambulance on the way to Altrincham General Hospital. The co-pilot, 21-year-old Flight Sergeant Edward Newell, was trapped under the plane's nose and was dragged clear by Walton Park residents Frank Worrell and Eric Meacham. His first words were, "Where is Freddy? Have you got him out yet?" Freddy, Flight Sergeant Matthews, the 26-year-old pilot who had struggled so courageously to avoid the houses and crash land on the only open space for miles, died 6 hours later in Altrincham General Hospital. Charles Sutcliffe and his son were among the heroes that helped drag the crew from the inferno. "Bullets and cannon shells were exploding around us," recalled Charles Jr. Pilot Officer Clive Luther, the middle gunner, was taken to the Sutcliffe home, where Gladys Sutcliffe, a nurse and wife of Charles Jr., treated his head wound. Mary Sutcliffe, Gladys's mother, organized a house-to-house collection and took a parcel of cigarettes and drinks to the survivors in the hospital. Pilot Officer Luther kept in touch with the Sutcliffe family and spent some of his leaves with them, but was killed on a Pathfinder mission to Holland in December 1944. The Australian officially listed Mary Sutcliffe as one of his next of kin, and in August 1945, she received a letter of deep regret from the Royal Australian Air Force. Keith Forbes could not see outside from his position and remembered nothing until waking up in hospital, where he was treated for a broken leg, ankle, and wrist. Due to his injuries, he never saw active service again, which probably saved his life, as he was the only member of the crew to survive the rest of the war. Most of the tale was his to tell. Sergeant John Titch McCarthy, who had joined the flight at the last moment to complete his flying hours, suffered from burns and shock. Dorothy Stelfox, then 7, and her brother Andrew were in bed at 7 Walton Road when they heard a terrible crash above the bedroom. She recalls, "I remember hearing the spluttering engine and bricks from the chimney crashing on the roof of our outhouse. The house was full of soot, and we were all so frightened." Another disaster story of what ifs. What if Freddy had hesitated for just a moment? There certainly would have been many civilian casualties. Apparently, this is a memorial to the crash that happened that night. So I came across this story as a result of a conversation on Facebook about this standing stone here. Well, it's not an ancient standing stone, or I don't think it is. I don't actually know the story of this standing stone, and apparently no one else does either, because someone surmised that it was a memorial to the aircraft crash in 1943, but of course it isn't. And George Cogswell set me straight on that, and of course he's since put up a memorial, proper memorial, to the aircraft that crashed that night.